Welcome to Life Hacks for People in a Hurry. Today, we're diving into From Strength to Strength by Arthur C. Brooks. This isn't just a book, it's a game changer for anyone who's ever felt stuck, wondering what's next after the highs of success. Whether you're soaring or searching for new purpose, Brooks's insights will reshape how you approach life's inevitable transitions. Now, let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're on a flight, sipping your coffee, minding your own business. Behind you, there's an older couple talking. The husband leans in, his voice heavy with resignation. He says, "I feel useless. Nobody needs me anymore." His wife sighs, frustrated but patient, and responds, "Stop saying such discouraging things." It's a conversation you've probably overheard before, or maybe even had yourself. Arthur Brooks heard this conversation, too. And as he sat there, his mind started filling in the blanks. He imagined this man as someone who had worked hard his entire life, maybe quietly, diligently. Someone who had accomplished a lot, but still didn't feel like it was enough. Then, the plane landed. The man stood up and Brooks was stunned. This wasn't just any man. This was a celebrity, a household name, someone millions admired, a living legend. As the man walked down the aisle, other passengers lit up, pointing, whispering. Even the captain came out to shake his hand. "You were my hero growing up," he said. And for a moment, the man smiled, like he was back in the glow of his glory days. So here's the million-dollar question. Why? Why would someone so accomplished, so adored, feel useless? Brooks couldn't stop thinking about it. This wasn't just a one-off crisis. It was bigger, deeper. And it hit home for Brooks, too. At the time, he was riding high, teaching leadership at Harvard, running a massive think tank, influencing government policy. By any measure, he was winning at life. But even at the top, he felt tired, inadequate, like he was already slipping downhill. And get this, he was only 48. So what does someone like Arthur Brooks do when life throws a curveball? He digs in. He starts asking the tough questions. Why do we feel this way? What's really going on when the achievements that once fueled us no longer bring joy? And, most importantly, how do we move forward when the ladder we've been climbing starts to crumble beneath us? That's where From Strength to Strength comes in. This isn't just a book, it's a guide. Brooks went deep into the science. Neuroscience, philosophy, history, you name it. He read biographies, studied the greats, and interviewed leaders from every walk of life. Mom and pop shop owners, CEOs, even world leaders. What he discovered was profound. What's often called a midlife crisis is actually an opportunity to transition from the first curve to the second curve of life. Now, you're probably wondering, what are these curves? Great question. The first curve is powered by fluid intelligence, that sharp, quick problem-solving ability that drives early success. But as we age, fluid intelligence naturally declines. That's where the second curve comes in, powered by crystallized intelligence, the wisdom, experience, and perspective you've been building all along. It's about shifting from being the achiever to becoming the mentor, the guide, the sage. But here's the thing, transitioning to the second curve? It's not automatic. It's not easy. It requires reflection, effort, and, sometimes, letting go of the things you thought defined you. So today, we're unpacking Brooks's blueprint for this shift. We'll explore what we can learn from others who've made this transition, some successfully, some not so much. And we'll ask the big question, how can you, wherever you are in life, find your way from strength to strength? Let's jump in. This one's going to be good. What if I told you that no matter how successful you are right now, there's a good chance your career is going to decline sooner than you think? Sounds harsh, right? But stay with me, because today we're tackling a truth no one likes to admit, but everyone eventually faces: career decline. Here's the big idea Brooks lays out. Career decline during midlife isn't just common, it's inevitable. Let that sink in. It doesn't matter how much you've achieved, how hard you've worked, or how talented you are. At some point, the curve starts to dip. Let's start with an obvious example: athletes. We all know their careers are short, right? Brooks points out that athletes in explosive sports, like sprinters or gymnasts, typically hit their peak between ages 20 and 27. Endurance athletes, like marathon runners, might stretch that out a bit longer, but not by much. And Brooks actually spoke to athletes about this. They all agree, by the time you're 30, you've either transitioned to something new or you're clinging to a fading dream. Now, you might be thinking, sure, that's athletes. What about the rest of us? Great question. Let's look at intellectual work. A professor at Northwestern studied inventors and Nobel Prize winners over a century and found something fascinating. Groundbreaking scientific achievements usually happen in a person's 30s. By their 40s, the chances of making a major breakthrough drop significantly. Take Paul Dirac, the legendary physicist. By 31, he'd won a Nobel Prize and written principles of quantum mechanics. After that, his work became more incremental, solid, but nowhere near the brilliance of his youth. And here's the kicker. Dirac actually wrote a poem warning that his best work was behind him. A physicist turned poet because he missed his prime. And this pattern isn't unique to him. Modern researchers peak a bit later now, since today's knowledge base takes longer to master. But the timeline is still clear. Physicists peak at 50, chemists at 46, pharmacologists at 45. After that, the curve starts to drop. All right, so maybe you're not a scientist. What about writers? Financiers? Doctors? Same story. Writers tend to produce their best work between ages 40 and 55. Financial professionals hit their top years between 36 and 46. And doctors? Their peak skills are in their 30s. Here's a cold, hard stat. A Canadian study found that anesthesiologists over 65 had a 50% higher error rate than those under 51. Let that sink in. And entrepreneurs? Surely, they age like fine wine, right? Not quite. While their wealth might grow over time, their most creative years are eerily similar to those of athletes in their 20s. A Harvard Business Review study found that most billion-dollar venture capital deals come from entrepreneurs aged 20 to 34. Another study gives a slightly more generous timeline, suggesting peak productivity might last until around 45. But here's the hard truth. Only 5% of successful entrepreneurs are over 60. Brooks didn't stop there. He looked at police officers, nurses, engineers, musicians, you name it, and found the same trend. Most professionals hit their peak between 35 and 50. In creative fields, it's about 20 years into your career. It's almost like there's a biological clock ticking in the background. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is depressing. But hold on, Brooks isn't here to bum you out. He's not saying, pack it up, your best days are behind you. What he's saying is this: it's not about stopping the decline. It's about preparing for it. Here's the thing about data: it shows trends, not destinies. There are exceptions. People who defy the odds. People who find ways to thrive even as the first curve starts to drop. And that's exactly what Brooks wants us to focus on. Not the decline itself, but how we respond to it. So, what's the plan? How do we take this hard truth and turn it into an opportunity? Buckle up, because this is where it gets interesting. Let's keep going. What happens when the career that once defined you begins to fade? Brooks explores this moment of reckoning through 3 compelling stories of resilience and reinvention, and the lessons they hold for all of us. Let's start with Charles Darwin. Yes, that Darwin, the guy who redefined how we understand life with On the Origin of Species. At 22, Darwin was sailing around the world on the HMS Beagle. By 27, he had his groundbreaking theory of natural selection. At 50, he published the book that sealed his legacy. But here's the twist. After that, Darwin's career slowed down. He never made another significant breakthrough. Even more painful? He missed Gregor Mendel's work on genetics, a discovery that could have supercharged his theory. But Darwin never saw Mendel's paper, buried in an obscure journal written in German. Now, how did Darwin handle this? With quiet dignity. He kept working, even though he felt stuck. But his story shows how easy it is to miss opportunities when you stay locked into a single trajectory. Next, Let's talk about Linus Pauling, a man whose response to career decline was, let's just say, more dramatic. Pauling is the only person to win two unshared Nobel Prizes in two entirely different fields. In his 20s and 30s, he was unstoppable. His book, The Nature of the Chemical Bond, revolutionized chemistry. By 53, he had his Nobel Prize in chemistry. Not long after, he won the Peace Prize for anti-nuclear activism. A global icon, right? But here's the thing, his scientific work had dried up. Instead of accepting it, Pauling doubled down. He started pushing unscientific medical theories, using his fame to promote ideas that tarnished his reputation. His refusal to let go of his first curve led to questionable decisions, and his legacy took a hit. Now, let me introduce you to someone who handled decline with grace and brilliance, Johann Sebastian Bach. Today, we celebrate Bach as one of history's greatest composers. But during his lifetime, he wasn't even the most famous musician in his family. That honor went to his son, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, who was riding the wave of the trendy classical style while Johann's Baroque music was considered old-fashioned. But Johann didn't fight for the spotlight. Instead, he shifted his focus. He became a teacher, pouring his energy into mentoring his children. Of his 20 kids, 10 survived to adulthood, and 4 became composers themselves. Through teaching, Bach left a legacy that extended far beyond his personal achievements. And here's the best part. During this time, Bach wrote the Art of Fugue. It started as a teaching tool, but is now regarded as one of his masterpieces. By embracing his role as a mentor and leaning into his crystallized intelligence, the wisdom and experience he had gained, Bach created something timeless. So here's the takeaway. Darwin, Pauling, and Bach show us 3 different paths when careers start to decline. Darwin kept pushing but stayed stuck. Pauling chased fame in the wrong places and damaged his legacy. But Bach? He adapted. He transitioned from creator to mentor, found new purpose, and left a legacy that outlived him. The big question is, when your first curve starts to dip, what will you do? Fight it, flounder, or adapt and thrive? That's where the real transformation begins. Stick around, because we're just getting started on how to make that leap. Let's explore intelligence. Not just how smart you are, but how your brain evolves over time, and what that means for your career, your creativity, and your life. You might think intelligence just kind of fades as we age, right? You're sharp when you're young, and then, slowly, the decline sets in. But here's the kicker. That's only half the story. Let's break it down, starting with the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for problem-solving, multitasking, and memory. As you hit middle age, this area starts to decline, leading to 3 big changes. First, your ability to analyze problems quickly and think innovatively takes a hit. Second, multitasking gets harder. Suddenly, you need quiet to focus or mistakes creep in. And third, memory slips a bit, forgetting names or where you left your keys. Classic, right? Now, early research looked at these changes and concluded that intelligence just drops as you get older. But here's the good news. That's not the whole story. While some abilities decline, others actually improve, and these might be even more powerful. Take verbal expression. As you age, your vocabulary grows, and your ability to explain complex ideas gets sharper. Sure, it might take a second to find the perfect word, but when you do, it lands with precision. This is why older mentors often seem so wise. They've mastered the art of connecting ideas. And then there's the ability to integrate diverse concepts. Younger minds might solve specific problems faster, but older minds see the big picture. Arthur Brooks shares how he's no longer as sharp with the detailed math from his younger years, but now he understands the broader landscape of his field. That perspective? Priceless. This ability shines in fields like history. Brooks points out that historians often hit their stride later in life. Writing sweeping narratives or synthesizing complex perspectives requires decades of accumulated experience. Younger historians excel at specific, innovative research, but the older ones tackle the big questions that shape how we understand the past. Let's not forget practical problem solving. Younger professionals bring energy and fresh ideas, but older professionals have the experience to adapt and find solutions that work in the real world. This is why applied mathematicians, for example, often peak later in their careers. It's not just about raw problem-solving power, it's about bridging theory and practice, something that takes time to master. So, what's happening in your brain to make this shift possible? In 1971, British psychologist Raymond Cattell introduced a groundbreaking model. He identified two types of intelligence, fluid and crystallized. Fluid intelligence is your raw brain power, quick thinking, problem solving, reasoning on the fly. It's what powers you in your early career. But crystallized intelligence? That's the wisdom and knowledge you accumulate over time. As fluid intelligence declines, crystallized intelligence grows, becoming your superpower later in life. This leads us to Brooks's concept of the first curve and second curve. The first curve is fueled by fluid intelligence. It's all about energy, innovation, and quick thinking in the early stages of your career. But as that curve dips, staying on it becomes a struggle. That's where the second curve comes in, powered by crystallized intelligence. Your ability to draw on experience, mentor others, and see the big picture. Look at Darwin and Linus Pauling. Their early successes were driven by fluid intelligence. But when their abilities declined, they struggled. Darwin became frustrated by his lack of progress, while Pauling tarnished his legacy by chasing fame with unscientific ideas. They were stuck on the first curve. Now consider Johann Sebastian Bach. In his early years, Bach's brilliance was powered by fluid intelligence, creating groundbreaking compositions. But as his first curve waned, he shifted to the second. He became a mentor, pouring his wisdom into teaching and creating works like The Art of Fugue, a masterpiece born from a lifetime of experience. He didn't fight the decline of fluid intelligence. He embraced the rise of crystallized intelligence. Here's the takeaway. The decline of fluid intelligence is inevitable, but the rise of crystallized intelligence is just as certain. The real challenge isn't stopping the decline, it's stepping onto the second curve. That's where experience, wisdom, and perspective become your greatest strengths. So, how do you make that leap? Stick around, because this shift? It's where the real magic begins. Let's tackle one of life's biggest challenges. How do you reinvent yourself when everything you once chased feels like it's slipping away? It's the classic midlife crisis. Brooks shows us that this isn't the end of the road. It's the start of something new and deeply fulfilling. Let's dive into his blueprint for making the leap from what he calls the first curve to the second curve. Step 1, and this one's a tough pill to swallow. You've got to let go of the first curve. In the first half of life, we're all about building careers, accomplishments, identities. And when that peak starts to fade, what do? Double down. Work harder. Try to reclaim past glory. But here's the truth, you can't reverse time. The harder you cling, the more stuck you become, burning out and sacrificing balance along the way. Brooks calls this self-objectification, where your entire sense of self is tied to performance and success. It's a dangerous trap, because the more you achieve, the harder it gets to accept anything less. The way out? Redefine yourself. Stop introducing yourself with just your job title. Embrace other roles: parent, friend, mentor, artist, adventurer. Start seeing yourself as a whole person, not just a productivity machine. Next, let's talk about relationships, real ones, not LinkedIn connections. Brooks says the key to thriving on the second curve is deep, meaningful friendships. Aristotle breaks it down into 3 types: utility friendships, based on mutual benefit; pleasure friendships, rooted in shared fun; and the highest form, ideal friendships, those built on shared values and genuine care. These are the friendships that make you wiser, stronger, and more connected to what really matters. Brooks shares how he and his wife make this a priority by hosting regular gatherings focused on big, soulful conversations, topics like love, purpose, and happiness. It's awkward at first, sure, but the depth of connection they've built is invaluable. Because here's the thing, as you age, wisdom grows through interaction. Without relationships, your crystallized intelligence, the experience and insights you've gained, has nowhere to go. Now, here's a hard truth. Stepping onto the second curve means embracing vulnerability. If you've spent decades projecting confidence and competence, this feels like stepping off a cliff. But Brooks shows us how leaning into your vulnerabilities can open doors you never imagined. He shares the story of a psychologist who went blind in midlife. Initially, the psychologist hid his condition, afraid it would make others uncomfortable. But one day, he was sought out by a high-profile client, specifically because his blindness made her feel secure and understood. That moment led to an entirely new career path built on empathy and connection. Brooks has his own story, too. As a celebrated scholar, he spent years hiding the fact that he didn't follow a traditional academic path. He earned his degree through distance learning at 30, a fact he thought would diminish his credibility. But when the opportunity arose, he shared his story in the New York Times, highlighting how remote education transformed his life. Instead of backlash, he received thousands of supportive messages. That vulnerability not only freed him from insecurity, but also deepened his connection with others. All right, let's bring it home. From Strength to Strength isn't just a book. It's a call to reimagine how we approach midlife, success, and the inevitable shifts in our lives. If you've ever feared what happens when your career starts to slow down, Brooks is here to tell you, it's not the end. It's the beginning of something new, something powerful. The big message? Career decline is real. It's a universal human experience. But instead of fighting it or fearing it, Brooks shows us how to embrace it. He flips the script. The second curve of life isn't about loss, it's about transformation. It's where you find deeper purpose, richer connections, and wisdom that can only come from lived experience. We unpacked the stories of Darwin, Pauling, and Bach today. Darwin, brilliant as he was, clung too tightly to his past success and found himself frustrated. Pauling, desperate to stay relevant, chased the wrong things and damaged his legacy. But Bach? Bach understood the secret. He pivoted from individual achievement to mentoring and creating something timeless, proving that the second curve can be even more fulfilling than the first. So how do you step onto that second curve? Brooks gives us 3 clear steps. First, let go of your attachment to career-based self-worth. You're more than your title, more than your resume. Second, lean into relationships. Build deep, soul-enriching friendships, the kind that let you share your wisdom and grow together. And third, embrace your vulnerabilities. When you stop hiding what you see as weaknesses, they become bridges that connect you to others and open up new opportunities. The second curve is a chance to thrive in new ways. By redefining success, nurturing relationships, and embracing change, we can create lives that are richer than ever before. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this resonated with you, share your thoughts and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.